the other thing in Alaska is there's a lot of hatches on rivers. There's some rivers that have fantastic caddis hatches. There's other rivers that have green drakes and beautiful mayfly hatches. There's a little lime green stone on many rivers. And so I would say always take a dry fly box and some 4X tippet, because I've been in some hatches with a seasoned veteran guide, a seasoned veteran angler, and we get there and there's literally heads coming up and sipping in mayflies, and they look at me.
That was Brian Okeefe sharing a nice tip on how to catch grayling in Alaska. This is the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show.
Welcome to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show, where you discover tips, tricks, and tools from the leading names in fly fishing today. We'll help you on your fly fishing journey with classic stories covering steelhead fishing, fly tying, and much more.
How's it going, everyone? Thanks for stopping by the Fly Fishing Show. Today's episode is sponsored by the Wet Fly Swing Member Society. The Society provides exclusive discounts and access to innovative products and services from our member partner companies. Just head over to wetflyswing.com/members to check out some of the companies who are on board. Plus, you can support the show at one convenient location. In today's episode, I talk with Brian Okeefe, who has spent his life traveling the world and fly fishing. We talk about how Brian made his first trip to New Zealand when he was 19 back in 1973 and hasn't stopped traveling since. Brian shares some of his best photo tips, how he started Catch Magazine, and why his accountant doesn't really understand his actual job. Don't miss this as Brian shares some DIY tips for Alaska and how to mouse up rainbows. This episode is sponsored by Deli Fresh Design, an all-American creator of fine, sustainable fly fishing gear. Stay tuned later in the show to hear how Ross does his part with DLD to reduce waste and impacts as he builds great equipment in a sustainable fashion. You can find Fresh Equipment Designs on Instagram at Deli Fresh Design, and you can get 20% off your next order using the coupon code WFS20 at delifreshdesign.com. So, without further ado, here's Brian Okeefe. How's it going, Brian?
It's going great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on. Your name has been popping around there the way I've been doing these shows for quite a while now, as I interview somebody and then, some more names come up and pop around, and then somebody just tells me straight up, you need to go interview that guy. And actually, River Horse, I think, was the last person that basically said, you need to get Brian on your show. So we're here now, and I'm excited to talk about some of the shows. You ready to get started?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So, I always start off a little bit on just the background before we get into all your background. I mean, there's a number of things we're going to go in today, including the photography and, some of the other stuff you have going, the worldwide traveling. But maybe you can just start us off and talk about how you first got into fly fishing.
Yeah, thanks. It's kind of a fun story, and I'm super lucky because my mother's father, my grandfather, Fred W. Johnson, was a dry fly purist in Missoula, Montana. So, that's a pretty neat way to start being a kid. You got a granddad who fishes. He also fishes a really traditional, more English style. He learned to fly fish in England, and so many of the streams over there, they don't allow wading, and you fish to rising fish only, and only upstream, and nothing subsurface. So as a little kid, 8 to 12, I was sort of on this path of becoming a fly fisher through my grandfather's ideals. And so he was very strict on casting, on knots, on identifying bugs, and he was a little bit ahead of his time, but he had a master plan for my brother and I, and eventually we left his front yard in Missoula for the Big Blackfoot River. So if you were writing a book, you might call this A River Runs Through It, because there's so many similarities. And although my brother and I are still both alive.
Okay,
and,
right.
So,
and hopefully you don't have too much of an issue with alcoholism.
No, I don't hope not. And so, we just fished the Blackfoot and learned a lot. We were kind of on a 3-year program. The first year we were on the river, we never actually fished with flies. He had us do fly casting practice. But then when we went to the river, we actually had these big, long, well, they're just called cane poles with line on the end of them and to a hook, and we would catch live grasshoppers. And we would dab them around the pockets and places because his mission was to teach us where trout lived. And then about the third year, we put it all together, and we could actually, walk up the river, cast into good spots. We didn't adhere to English style of just rising fish only. We fished everything. Yeah. And back in the late 60s, any river in Montana with a Joe's hopper or gray wolf, there was a lot of action. So, his plan worked. We were pretty, savvy anglers as young people, and just never quit. And it's been a lifelong passion and job, and
that's cool.
Sort of everything rolled into one.
That's cool. So was your brother older or younger?
Yeah, he's a year and a half older.
Okay.
And still loves to fish. He's sort of branched out into other fun things, but sure. I sort of carried the torch.
Yeah, that's a cool story. Yeah, and you said 1960, so Montana. Just the first thing that comes to mind. I recently interviewed Joe Brooks, the great nephew, I guess, of the actual Joe Brooks, and he was a big guy. Yeah. They called him Mr. Montana. Do you remember anything about Joe Brooks back in the day?
Of course. Yeah, but I read all his books, and he was a contributor to Outdoor Life magazine, and I kind of grew up with an appreciation for him because I saw some of my first photographs from Argentina and places like that a long, long time ago. And that probably planted a little seed and became part of why I wanted to travel a lot. But on the other side, my grandfather hated him because he promoted Montana, and he kind of, coined the phrase blue ribbon trout stream. And then all these rivers were in his articles, and I read them all because I pored over that stuff. And it just bothered my granddad to no end. So I had this sort of a love-hate relationship with Joe Brooks. But I'm glad you had a contact and were able to get some of probably the neat family history that he had. Yeah,
we did. That episode, I don't have it handy for me. But yeah, the interesting thing, not to go too deep in Joe's life, but I mean, he was, had a crazy life because he started out on kind of, very well-to-do. But then through his life, midway, he found himself living homeless on the streets. And wow. It was amazing. For 5 years, he disappeared and was pretty much just a homeless, transient. And then I
didn't know that.
Yeah, and out of nowhere, he gets sober, and for the rest of his life, he dedicates it to teaching people about fly fishing.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Yeah, so that's the story, and that's the documentary that we chatted about on that episode. But yeah, I mean, for your story here, so I did want to ask you about where the bug came from. So it sounds like guys like Joe Brooks. Is there any other thing you can attribute, because you've traveled pretty much all over the world, right, fly fishing?
Yeah, I got an early start. I'm 64, and when I was right out of high school. Well, I had a plan to graduate from high school a semester early, and then I moved during my senior year, and my new school district in Portland, Oregon would not allow me to graduate early. They said I had to stay for the whole year, even though in that school district I had enough credits to graduate after my junior year. So I worked, and I saved money, and my plan was to go to New Zealand for 3 months during that, semester I was going to be gone, and go to Oregon State and start a fish and wildlife program. Well, I stayed the whole year, but I still had my ticket and my money saved, so I headed off to New Zealand in 1973. And that's basically a long time ago. What year were you born in?
75.
Well, you see?
Yep.
That seems like a long time ago then. So, but to put it in perspective, and going back to my grandfather a little bit, my grandfather and grandmother went to fly fish in New Zealand, dedicated fly fishing trip, in 1951.
Wow.
And now I even wonder, how did they get there? My friends didn't even know where New Zealand was when I left in 1973. It's almost it's a new country in geologic time, but it's still, did they take boats? I don't even know. I'm sure they probably flew most of the way. But so here here's some perspective on, who is a trout bum and who's exploring and no, it's all been done. Yeah. Even, New Zealand, 1951 had to be kind of a pioneering deal, because when I went in 73, I basically backpacked from the north of the North Island all the way to the south of the South Island and zigzagged back and forth from river to river. And in that whole fishing season, every day, I only ran into anglers in one place, and that was the famous Lake Taupo. Huh. And there's always going to be anglers there. It's rich in history and tradition. But once I got off into the valleys and the mountains and just backpacked, lived off the land and fished, I never saw another angler in New Zealand in the entire fishing season. So, well, those days are long gone.
Yeah.
But what a great experience it was to just be freewheeling, 19 years old, at a Fenwick fiberglass rod, a Pfluger medalist reel, scientific angler, ivory, floating line, and miscellaneous flies. And it doesn't matter really, the flies. In fact, I had to tie some. I was running low, so I just found chicken feathers at people's farms and made my own funky little flies. But, that was just a great way to get immersed into this world-class fishing scene, although I had great fishing in Montana and Washington, Oregon, British Columbia by the time I was 19. And so, well, my 3 months went too fast, and then I extended my visa to 6 months, and then that came and gone. But I was way in the south of the South Island, middle of nowhere. And, actually, they take immigration very seriously in New Zealand, and I was caught. And the next day, the police put me on a plane to Melbourne, Australia, which, I guess I was kind of done and ready to go anyway. But long story short, I went across Australia to the outback, worked, and then worked my way up through Indonesia and Southeast Asia. And I got a job teaching skiing in Kashmir, India, in the Himalayas. They have a little ski resort up there with chairlifts and stuff. So I was basically their first ski instructor, and my job was to teach these world-class climbing guides how to ski so they could become the ski school the next year. And eventually, the seasons roll, and I come home, and it's summer, and I lucked into a job in Alaska, and I went up there and eventually made my way to Oregon State and Central Oregon College, and then, I'm sort of back to reality, and from there, I was just a total goner for fishing. I experienced some wonderful stuff. It was just starting the process of where to go next and how can I keep doing this, and do I have to get a real job? And so, how things, one thing leads to another. So I had a part-time job in a sporting goods store running the fly department, and that turned into some guiding, and then that turned into going to the lodges in Alaska and meeting great people, and meeting one person who, that was Dennis Black. He started Umpqua Feather Merchants, which is just Umpqua now. And I started a rep job with him, and that turned into 20-some years. And so I believe in luck and meeting the right people and being in the right place at the right time and being able to take advantages of opportunities that come your way. And I didn't do anything that's that outrageous that anybody else couldn't have done, but I was just in a position to be sort of mobile and, go with the flow. And I was single most of my life, so I had the ability to travel and pick up and go. And there's only a few things I would change. Otherwise, I've been a lucky guy, and a lot of neat things came my way. And I wouldn't, I'm just sort of glad I didn't go straight to college and get a job and go into a cubicle or something like that. I'm glad I sort of was a bit of a bum.
That's right. That's right. Was that in your...
Got the travel bug.
Was that in your 20s when you first hit that in or that first trip? How old were you?
I was 19 in 1973.
Yeah, 19. Think. Yeah, so you're right on the word of advice. I can't remember who mentioned this recently, but I wish I would have had this word of advice. But it was your 20s are basically given to you. So take advantage.
Yeah.
So you actually now that I think about that, that might have been you. That might have been you on another podcast I heard that said that advice. But so basically you did you never got a real job then, right? You pretty much have always been doing. I mean, it sounds like you've managed to be in. I mean, from starting in skiing, but really the fly fishing industry. That's been what you've been doing all this time.
Yeah, and the fly fishing, it's kind of an industry. I'm not sure I'm totally sold that it is, but it's definitely it's a group of businesses. And when I had my rep job, I started out. I had Orvis in the Northwest in Alaska, Umpqua, and eventually worked for Sims, Patagonia, Scott Rod, Scientific Anglers, just some great companies, fantastic people. And when I started, you needed a rather large territory because there weren't as many fly shops, and it's almost reverted back to that now. But so I had parts of Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, Washington, Oregon, and Alaska. So gigantic territory, but can you imagine the great fishing opportunities? So you've got I had sort of a winter car, like a Subaru 4-wheel drive, and then I had a van, more like a rep van with all my samples. So I would just be on the road almost constantly. Huh. And, in the Rockies, you can't do much in the morning because they have guide trips going out. So you fish in the morning. Then you can see the owners or managers during the day, middle part of the day, and then their guide trips come back about 4. So you're back out on the water. And it was just great. I could fish almost every day.
Wow.
Get my job done. And the cool thing was there was no internet, and there was no cell phones, and there was no email. So everybody that was a sales rep had a little, cassette phone machine at their house. And it basically said the same thing. Hi, I'm Brian Okeefe. I'm on the road. Please leave a message at the beep. Well, to me, being on the road meant Idaho, Alaska, or Belize, the Bahamas, or Christmas Island. I mean, my sales manager didn't know really where I was. They didn't have, your constant technology now of text and email, and
so you could just disappear. You could disappear for 2 weeks, and nobody even know.
Yeah, in fact, my best month I ever had as a commissioned sales rep, I was out of the country 3 weeks. So I kind of worked the system.
It sounds like it sounds like a pretty, if you can make it work, it sounds like a pretty amazing life that, that what you just talked about there. Is that something, are people still, is that still the life for the reps?
Well, it's changed just a lot, mainly because of technology. And, there's been some highs and lows. In the 90s, it was really a great job. It paid really well. There's new shops opening up, some great people getting in the sport. It was a real boom in that a lot of people were picking up fly rods for the first time and becoming kind of weekend warriors, but some of those graduated into, lifestyle and lifetime anglers. But, we were so busy, and there's a lot of sales meetings, and there were sport shows and trade shows. So it's a real job. And you don't work for Sims or Patagonia or Scientific Anglers, which was at the time owned by 3M, and just be a total fish bum. You really had to get the job done. And people were looking at your numbers just like they do every day in every job today. But if you could get those numbers and be just a little elusive and sneaky, it was one of the best lifestyle jobs where you could make good money and have a lot of fun. And I think today there's still some of that, except you're just a little bit more, tied to technology, so everybody knows where you are, and it's a little hard to sneak away. But, who's to say that fishing with a fly shop owner isn't work?
Right.
Of course it is. You're going to be trying rods, reels, lines, and flies. So, there's a way to keep it fun. You would expect a golf pro to golf. You'd expect a ski instructor to ski. So there's no reason why people in the fishing business shouldn't fish.
Yep.
I just had that conversation with my tax person. He did not get it. But but anyway, it's like any other outdoor sport. You've got to do it. You got to stay relevant.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Well, let's, I'm sure we'll circle back around to some of this. I wanted to, there's a few things I want to get into. I want to talk a little about, the photography stuff you've done, which is pretty amazing. And then, we got a little bit on Catch Magazine for sure I want to touch on, but I want to jump into Alaska because, it sounds like you've done quite a few trips out there. And I read an article or something out there where you wrote something about, kind of different ways to do Alaska. One of them was a DIY sort of thing, and we're kind of in a season right now where we're doing, it's basically, I'm calling it kind of a destination DIY season. So could you speak to maybe an Alaska trip and maybe help somebody who maybe hasn't ever been up there and wants to maybe do a DIY type of trip, or just speak to that a little bit?
Oh yeah, sure. There's so many opportunities in Alaska because it's several different states rolled into one. You've got the southeast section of Juneau and all down there, and that's kind of tough to do on your own because it's surrounded by water and there's no roads and you need a boat or a float plane. But then as you move up, to the, like Anchorage, Kenai, some of those areas are very accessible with rental cars. And I did a lot of that as a rep. I'd get a rental car that I could sleep in, and I'd work and fish my way from Fairbanks down to Denali, down to Wasilla, down to Anchorage, and out to the Kenai Peninsula to Seward and Homer. So I had just fantastic fun fishing just on the road with a rental car, and you can do that pretty cheap. And then there's the bigger trips, the float trips, particularly in the Bristol Bay area or a little north. And there's a lot of different rivers there, and to sort of address that, because that's the sort of the ultimate trip. A few things. One, it's probably best to go to Alaska once, and if it's possible, hire a guide or do a set program just to be familiar with bears, to be familiar with the weather, fishing techniques, and things like that. Now, a person who has basically good outdoor skills and has camped in, big winds or rain. And if you feel fairly confident that you can hold your own in bear country, then a person could go and organize say a week-long float trip without going to Alaska, but maybe just back up. Let's just say it's better to have some Alaska experience than not. Yeah. But, so the basics are, there's quite a few rivers that have lodges and guides. There's some rivers that don't. And so a person might as well get the most complete Alaska experience you can and try to find rivers that aren't guided and or have a lot of float planes on them or lodges on them with lots of jet boats. So that just takes some research. Everything's basically online. Yeah. You can go river by river and
What was one of your favorite, if you think of maybe a species? Did you have a certain species you really loved to go for up there?
Yeah, actually, I'm glad you asked that. My favorite type of trip was leaving early in the season, meaning June. And actually, between my friends and my brother and I, when we planned these trips, we would sometimes be the very first raft down a river. So the charter company that you connect with, it has a de Havilland beaver or an otter or a goose that takes rafts and anglers and drops you off. Usually they also provide the raft and oars, and definitely get oars, not paddles. Cooking equipment, everything except sleeping bag, tent, and tackle. So once that's all arranged, you get dropped off. Well, they'll say, well, yeah, you should do okay. We haven't dropped anyone off there yet this year. And that would always make us smile because this is great, And we'd always throw in what's called a bow saw. And of course, the blade's protected and all that. But there's trees that sometimes fall across rivers, and you'd have to see them and then go cut them out of the way because the first raft down is going to be the one that has to do all that work. But you get first crack at all the fish. So the reason we like going early was that the rivers hadn't been fished very much, and they don't get fished a lot anyway. But normally in the headwaters where you're dropped off, it can be kind of slow. It's super cold, and there's not a lot of insect life. But as you work your way down and rivers pick up some of the tundra tributaries that are a little warmer, you start getting into bug life. You start hitting char and grayling. And then maybe on day 2 or 2.5, you hit the rainbows. And we just love to mouse fish for rainbows. But, of course, the little baby sockeye, chum, chinook, and silver salmon are migrating too. And they're about 1.25 inches. Each species looks identical. So if you've got a nice little fry pattern that looks like a baby sockeye especially, and you swing that through these riffles and runs, there's just these big attacks from rainbows and char. Everything basically is feeding on these fry. That's about the only game in town. So it's a real important food source for the fish, and consequently, as an angler, you're going to try to match that. And it's a fun technique because you're a tight line swing like steelhead, and you have big hits and then immediate jumps. And so that either the mousing or the fry pattern fishing was super fun. And then about day 5, you start floating over your first king salmon, and they're fresh, and they're bright, well, pretty bright. Sometimes they turn a little pink or rose colored, but they're fresh, they're hot. And so you've got your 9 or 10 weight that's been sitting in the raft for a few days, and you've been catching rainbows or even pulling off into some sloughs and fishing for pike. And then you hit the kings, and now you've got a kind of a king rainbow combination for the rest of the float. And you combine that with the light being out all day and almost all night. It really never gets too dark in June. So some of the evening fishing and after dinner fishing is fantastic. And so there's the great fishing, then there's this long day, and then the camp cooking, which is always a blast. I think I enjoy some of that just camp stuff as much as anything else. And you get your buddies are all having fun. And
what would you go out there for?
You
like
just roll that all together.
Would you do like a week at a time?
5 to 7 days. Some rivers are as much as 100 miles. So, that takes a whole week and even maybe 8 days. But
and were you guys
fortunately now with GPS?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, were you guys just out there, grab a Chinook and grab a fillet and had fresh fish all the time? Is that how you worked it?
Yeah. You definitely have to like fish because there's a weight restriction on your flight in and out. But, so you provide your own food, and you take, your best bang for the buck, which would be frozen chicken breasts, maybe some steaks, a lot of pastas that's light that can then become more of a meal, and, pancake batter and that sort of thing. But you have a weight restriction, so you got to put in your beverages, whatever people might prefer, whether it's just pop or beer or bourbon or tequila. And, that all adds up. So you have to sacrifice a few pounds here and there, and you don't have the luxury of taking ice either. So, the rivers are cold. You have a mesh bag for your beverages. And so eating fish was really part of the menu, at least every day and sometimes 2 meals a day. So you have scrambled eggs with salmon, and you can make kind of a salmon sandwich. And then at dinner, you can have grilled or cooked in foil or any kind of combination. And we figured on a week-long float trip that you basically had salmon in every form except a salmon margarita. And you just, you might get a little tired of it after a while. Salmon is a strong flavor that can kind of overwhelm, but it's healthy and it's there. And the key was not to catch some big 22-pound king salmon. It was to catch a 4 to 6 pound Chinook jack, so immature male salmon. And to a degree, it's still debated whether they affect the spawning or not. They're mostly immature, and they just go up there, but they die like salmon do. And so they were sort of our prize catch. If a person could catch a 4 to 6 pound chrome bright jack king, they didn't have to do dishes because they provided the meal. And so it became, kind of involved to a degree because you're loving catching the bigger fish, but in reality, you're like hoping for a really small one too, because that's just perfect. You eat it all. Yeah. There's no waste. Bones and guts are in the river. Bears and seagulls and eagles eat all that. And then, it's just, part of the whole thing is camp cooking and catching the right fish. And it's really fun.
How many trips do you think you've made up to Alaska?
I was asked that a little while ago, and I don't know, but I'm sure I've made over 50.
Oh, no kidding. Yeah. That's amazing. That's cool. Yeah. So you've been up all around. I mean, without like giving away any secrets or anything, is there a kind of a spot that everybody knows about that, where you might be able to do this sort of a trip that you're talking about? I mean, I know there's tons of places, right? Depending, you mentioned some of them, the Kenai Peninsula, but as far as getting a float plane, maybe doing it yourself, is that still a pretty easy thing just to do? Call up somebody and say, I want to go into Kodiak or something like that, or what would you recommend there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. You can do it from Kodiak all through the Alaska Peninsula, Bristol Bay, and farther north. every little town that's, like there's King Salmon, Naknek, Dillingham, those towns, all of them have.
They all have it.
Everything's served by plane. So several people really depend upon a certain amount of people to contact them via usually, their website. And, they're in the business to get a few anglers out to these rivers. And there's other options too. There's parts of, Alaska, like in the Wood-TikChik, where there's fantastic canoeing from lake to river systems.
Oh, cool.
And, there's other places that are drop off and set up a big camp. I've done that on the Nushagak, where you're dropped off and you put up a few tents, and you're say just above tidewater, so each high tide brings in the fresh kings, and you just wade out in front of camp, and swing, and maybe only fish 200 or 300 yards the whole time you're there, but each tide brings in new fish, so they're coming to you, which is kind of a neat deal. And I've also done some charters in southeast Alaska, and again, people have websites. They're not hard to find. And I did three different kinds of trips down there. I really wanted to find and catch feeding kings in the salt. So prime of their life, chrome silver, feeding on herring and candlefish. And that was accomplished. It was hard. You don't catch a lot, but it's really, really fun when you do. And you're in some of the most beautiful scenery in the world. And then the other one was to do silvers in the fall in the salt, or the lower 100 feet of some rivers. Right in tidewater.
Right.
And that can be literally almost all day action. When it's a good silver run, they're easy to catch. They're really feisty. And the last trip, which I did maybe three times, was finding a charter that would go river to river with a couple Zodiacs or a little jet boat and target steelhead in the spring. And that's pretty uncommon fishing, which is sort of strange because there's over 1,000 steelhead rivers in Alaska.
Jeez.
But I challenged my friends to name 2 or 3. So it's just odd, but they're inaccessible. Sometimes you can't fly into them. You only can use a boat. But at times those places are so rough, there's so much tide, and they're dangerous. So we chartered those king crab boats that were sort of decommissioned. Alaska bought out a certain amount of license holders, so the owners still had their boat, but they couldn't commercial king crab fish anymore because they were bought out. Well, they're the best skippers in the world. They have seaworthy boats, and they're up for anything. So we would take those kind of deadliest catch guys and put 4 or 5 friends on a boat with some Zodiacs or kayaks, and off we'd go and just go river to river and hike up. And at times it was unbelievably great steelheading. Other times, no, you struck out because some of these rivers are very short. They may only get 300 fish a year. And, you might want to, don't want to be like a fish hog, but catching a couple is okay. Other rivers were bigger, big systems with tributaries, and they had, thousands of fish per year that would run up. So those were just great trips. The only thing is those bears have never seen people, and you are a food item to them or a serious competitor. So they don't just kind of give you stink eye and you walk around them. You see a bear in that country, you really got to be on your toes and have a plan B for which way to go and what to do, because just a lot different than the popular rivers around Katmai in that area.
Oh, right. Did you ever have any close encounters that were you kind of thought you might not make it?
Yeah, I did. As a guide up there, you dealt with bears almost every day, and you sort of develop this almost sort of bulletproof attitude because they mostly run away or they stand their ground and you can go around them and they don't follow you or do anything weird. Now that's 90-something% of the time. But the other percent is the bluff charges or ones that come out of nowhere or, South Cubs and things like that. So it can get a little hairy. The worst experience I ever had was on my first day as a guide in Alaska. So I was hired, and I get up there. It was on the Copper River, and That's not the famous Copper River for Copper River
Right.
King salmon. It was the Copper River that's fly fishing only that goes into Lake Iliamna. And so after we got settled in, there was just 2 guides. We were at a small little camp. And we were going to be flown around to several of the rivers that we would guide so we could learn the places where the planes come in, when to be there, just logistics. But we would want to take a few casts in each spot just to kind of get the feel of the waters. And that would be like Tulare Creek, Gibraltar, Dream Creek, those rivers around Iliamna. So we flew into this one lake, and we went up this stream, and I was by myself, and I just wanted to go look it over, and I walked up onto a sleeping bear, literally 3 feet away. 2 more steps, I would have kicked it.
Jeez.
And I went, oh, God, and it sensed me, heard me, turns around, jumps up on its hind legs. It's taller than me, snarling and spitting with these giant claws out in front, and I'm 4 feet away.
Wow.
And I'm just saying, this is it. This is it. It's all over. And I just started to say, the usual, don't make eye contact, talk softly, and just slink away. And I did that. I just, hey, bear, hey, bear. And I took steps back real slow. I walked out backwards sort of into the creek a little bit, and the bear was still snarling and spitting. And then it dropped down to all fours and turned around and ran off. And so basically I scared it. Probably as a wild animal, it's thinking, there's predator-prey relationships in all situations. So it thought maybe a bigger bear had just stumbled onto it. So it was kind of freaked out. I was pretty freaked out. And I thought,
wow.
I don't know about this Alaska guiding. This is pretty hairy stuff. So, but
Did you ever...
that was probably my closest encounter, although I have been followed by bears where I couldn't lose them, and they just tracked me crossing rivers.
Would you ever carry a shotgun or any sort of stuff like that?
Yeah, when it was legal on some rivers, because a lot of my fishing was in the Katmai National Park. You can't take a weapon, and or other places, but several spots, the jet boats had a baseball bat and a sawed-off shotgun, but fortunately, I don't know anyone who's really ever had to use it to save a life or something like that. Occasionally, you might fire a round as a noise deterrent because you're filleting silvers on the beach and you're waiting for the plane, and the bears decide that those fish are a lot easier to catch than the ones in the river. So you're just making noise and biding some time. But fortunately, as much as I love pheasant hunting and deer and elk hunting and all that, but I don't want to shoot a bear legal or in an emergency situation either. So I'm glad that never happened. I think bears are really cool, and that's just part of the Alaska experience.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it makes you feel better more than anything having the shotgun. Yeah, just like it's something just in case something crazy happens. That's about it. But So, okay.
It's a good sleeping pill too.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there's a bunch of stuff we could go on here on Alaskan, and maybe we'll swing back around here, but I did want to touch base a little bit on Catch Magazine, because I think that's, one of your projects that seems like it's really blown up pretty big, I guess, part of the whole Instagram and everything that's been going on. But can you talk a little bit about Catch Magazine, maybe describe it to somebody who's never kind of heard about it or read anything about it?
Yeah. Thanks for asking, because I'm really proud of it. And I was the co-owner with Todd Moen. And so a few years ago, I gave Todd the whole thing. I wanted to help him and promote him, be his biggest cheerleader, but I just wanted to move on and do something different. And so I'm still talk with Todd constantly. He's in Australia right now filming a video. And so Catch Magazine came about because I was phasing out of my rep job. It was in that 2000, 2007, 2008 downturn in the economy, and my business was just sort of phasing down. And he had been a cameraman on like an ESPN type outdoor show, fishing show, and had just endured
Do you remember which one that was?
No, I don't, actually, because I've never been much of a TV guy.
I'll look up. I'll put a link in the show notes. I'll try to find out that. I like to, and some of the other stuff we'll talk about, I'll have links to all this in the show notes as well. So if I can find it.
Yeah, and also, if other people recommended people to interview, I'd say, get a hold of Todd. He's just a great guy and has lots of interesting, insight onto some of the behind-the-scenes part of fly fishing media. So, anyhow, he was in a plane wreck in the Bahamas with the camera crew, and nobody got hurt real bad. But he just said, he's getting married, wants to have kids, and he thinks he's going to have to find a different job, that he's not going all over the world all the time. So, at the same time, he was sort of interested in starting something, and I was looking at something new, and he was living in Bend, Oregon at the time. So that was just sort of a cool coincidence. And we would meet in coffee shops and poach their Wi-Fi, or we'd meet in one of the 20 brew pubs in Bend and poach their Wi-Fi. And we kicked around lots of different of ideas, because he brings a great skill set of computer, internet, and video. My skill set was, being a fishing bum and, photography and a few other things. So we just thought, gosh, we got something that's kind of cool here. We're both, in a neat position in a way to start something from scratch. And we did a few prototype projects. But again, we were in that downturn in the economy when really people were hurting and people were losing their homes and businesses were failing. Fly shops were dropping like flies. So we had the added challenge that, finding sponsors, finding advertisers, whatever we did, we found a lot of resistance just because of the economy. So we just decided let's just do what we do best. Todd, one of the best video guys in the world. I hold my own with photography. Let's just develop something that people will enjoy and we will enjoy also. And we kind of came up with Catch Magazine, which was, if there was like a one-word or a one-line description, it was kind of a coffee table book on fly fishing, made into magazine format. So it was the sort of a celebration of fly fishing art, video, film, photography. And so we didn't have articles on, how to wade or read the water, how to tie flies, how to cast. It was strictly art and entertainment. Mm-hmm. So it was photo essays from all over the world, some of the best photographers in the world, great contributors. And essays could include destinations, which was probably the most common. It's just really cool places, people's experiences. But it could also be a particular insect, like a brown drake or a damselfly, because you could do fantastic photo work with any kind of insect or hatch experience. We had some essays on people. We had essays on guides in general. We had just essays on everything. So, and it came out every other month, and it was free, and our popularity just skyrocketed. It was in 158 countries, and we had 200,000 readers and subscribers. Wow. We had decent advertising, but it still was a difficult sell. It was a little ahead of its time. Because
so was this before?
Catch Magazine's 10 years old.
Yeah, was this before or right when the Drake and the Fly Fish Journal were getting going?
I don't exactly remember.
Yeah.
There was only one other online fly fishing publication. Now, dozens have come and gone. A lot of them do one issue, and they go, "Wow, this is a lot of work, and there's not a lot of money in it, and I'm not fishing." So 3 strikes. But Todd and I were living at that, and as it got going, we both moved to Sisters, Oregon, just outside of Bend, and it's one of the most livable places in the world. And we were just having a blast, and Todd's a great worker. I know many times I would email him at 10 p.m. with a question, and boom, he'd get right back to me because he's still working. And that's good and bad in that we loved our job. People loved the product. There's half a dozen photo essays in one of his signature Todd Moen videos, which are fantastic. Many of his videos have over 2 million views, which in fly fishing is just unheard of. Yeah. I mean, I think a successful fly fishing video, people use a benchmark of around 30,000 is good, because that's about the size of some fly fishing magazines, was 30 to 40,000 subscribers. So if you got that in video, you're kind of holding your own. But 2 million videos on 2 million views on several of his videos is just like landmark accomplishment. It's just fantastic. So, and it's so funny because some of those videos we made for about $75 or $150 is a tank or two of gas, some peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and then just go out and make it happen. We didn't have a lot of, Todd's a one-man band, camera, sound, editing, music, everything.
What do you think was the secret to his the videos? Because I've seen some of it, and I'll put some of those in the show notes as well. But they are. What makes them so special? What would you say?
Well, our original theory on all that was to not really teach or preach too much, but just to show fly fishing as a beautiful sport. And I think Todd was also a little ahead of his time in say, the keep them wet movement. We always had fish in the water. We didn't do any big grip and grins and stuff. There was a lot of respect to the sport and respect to the fish. And we highlighted the beauty and the challenges of the sport, but not to see me, not so much the Instagram, Insta-famous stuff. It was really about an experience. We had a short little simple storyline, and we kept it, even though we went to some pretty cool places, we hardly ever used like a big fancy boat, like in-boat fishing, because in-boat fishing shows are generally just sort of bad. They're just kind of boring. And what can you do in a boat? So we're always walking or using a bike or using a little Honda Trail 90 or some funky, kind of raft or kayak. And I think people just are related to that it wasn't, a $200,000 jet boat.
This episode is sponsored by Deli Fresh Design, a company that makes sustainable fly fishing gear in the heart of Denver, Colorado. Deli Fresh blends old waders and recycled sailcloth with Cordura canvas to make rugged, river-tested gear such as fly wallets, sling packs, and my favorite, beer koozies. I had a great chat with Ross at Deli Fresh as I was blown away by his dedication to fly fishing and conservation. Here's a short clip of how Ross reduces waste with his personal actions and as a responsible company.
But as a company, I'm trying to reduce my impact by riding a bike or taking the bus or shared cars, stuff like that for commuting. And then, when I go fishing, I'll get in a car, but I try to go with other people. And so I think there's things that as consumers that we can do on a daily basis. My own mentality of doing those things on a daily basis, like driving or riding a bike, and then trying to see what materials I can use that reduce waste, or what I'm trying to do as a person and as a company.
Pretty good stuff, right? Let's support a great company doing business the right way. All of DFD's gear will help you spend more time casting and less time juggling your stuff. To see these great products, go follow them on Instagram, where you can see their latest designs. Head over to delifreshdesign.com and use the coupon code WFS20 to get 20% off your next order. That's Deli Fresh Design and the coupon code WFS20. When you were doing the videos, were you guys there working together on these things and taking photos at the same time, and kind of, was it kind of an equal thing, or were you off kind of doing, most of the photos on your own?
Yeah, when Todd and I did videos, and I've been in maybe 10 of his videos in 10 years. I don't want to be in more than one a year, and I just have a thing about kind of overexposure in any sport or business or activity. There's room for everybody, and I don't want to pig it. I don't want to be people to think that I'm some guy that just has to get his pictures taken all the time.
The rock star.
And so, but we're partners, and we bring in other people. We might have to pay, or we have to at least cover more costs and that sort of thing. So we kept it cheap. We kept it really fun and light, and we were nimble and fast. We got good at doing stuff. We weren't a big crew. We could jump around log jams and get the drone up, down, and do a lot. All through that, I would try to take some of my own photos too, just because we're in great spots and really neat stuff. But when you're doing a video, you do have to kind of stay focused on continuity and the storyline, that sort of thing. So it's not too easy to get a lot of photography done, but we managed to get a little bit of a balance in there. And I think the best part is we did a lot of work together, a lot of long nights. And we, of course, like any sort of little business, we've got financial issues and needs. And I think the best thing that came about 10 years later is Todd and I are still just great friends. And, I love his family, and I just love the quality of the work he does. He's really ethical, and just a pleasure to do that stuff with. And I just wish him the best of luck and success going down the road, because Catch Magazine still holds its own. It's a $12 subscription now for 6 issues. Mm-hmm. But when you get a Todd Moen original film and then some of the best photography around the world rolled into one what would that be? $2 an issue?
Yeah. It's pretty reasonable.
It's a pretty good deal. Yeah. And it's catchmagazine.net. Some people go to .com. It's catchmagazine.net.
Oh, yeah. I think I just typed it in, and I guess well, if you just type in Catch Magazine, it'll go to the .net for sure.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so that was a great project, and I still enjoy being involved as a contributor and helper and cheerleader, and I just hope it just rolls and rolls. It's a good product.
So now that, so I was kind of looking back at what we talked about. We had 1973, New Zealand, 2007, the crash of the market and your rep job ends, and now Catch Magazine, you're kind of out of that. What's your plan here for the rest of the rest of your time here? You got a lot of time left. Are you still sticking?
No, you're so kind. Yeah, in other words, I might have a couple good years left in me.
Yeah.
So, well, right now I work with a really cool company. It's called 11 Experience, and I work with 11 Angling. So 11 Experience is based in Crested Butte, Colorado, and it's a company that owns quite a few lodges, fishing lodges. Some of them double as heli ski lodges and snowcat skiing. So 2 of my favorite things, skiing and fishing. So we have a fishing group, and we staff, manage, and guide in some of the coolest places. Deplar Farm Lodge is considered possibly the nicest fishing lodge in the world. That's in Iceland. And right now, in fact, I got a text from a guy that's over there, and he did the helicopter skiing for half the day, then he threw on a wetsuit and he surfed in the afternoon, and he's going to try to do that, skiing in the morning, surfing, and then fishing for sea run browns in the evening, and do all 3 in one day, which would be really cool. So
that's right.
Anyhow,
what would you call that?
So
is there a name for that when you do all 3?
Not yet, but it's a type of Grand Slam for sure.
Yeah.
And so then there's other ski lodges in Europe, but then there's a really beautiful lodge in Patagonia and Chile with helicopter fishing down there, plus jet boats and rafts and drift boats and really fantastic fishing. So a mothership in the Bahamas, mothership in Florida and Louisiana, and a fantastic lodge in Colorado. And it's growing. And so there's probably 200 plus employees in the company.
Wow.
And it's called 11 Experience, which you could ask yourself or your listeners, like, how many you've heard of 11 Experience? And a lot of people would say, well, I haven't yet. What's up? I mean, it's just been kind of under the radar. It's a building and growing company of real avid, active, and super intelligent people running this company to make a real dynamic kind of approach to fishing and skiing. You can be laid back and you can just, fish here and fish there, but they really want people to get after it with the best equipment and awesome guides and fish the right time of year and right tides. And so it's just a little bit different than, say, maybe your average fishing lodge that has sort of a set program. And I've been to a lot and I love them all, to tell you the truth. There's very few bad ones, but I kind of like this approach of maybe a little bit more younger approach of being very physical, very active, using all the resources possible. And so that's my gig. I sort of
what is
do a little bit of everything for them.
Oh, you do? So your role is you kind of do whatever they need, you can do.
Yeah. And, since they're almost sort of a moving target, they're growing and they're just trying to get their brand out. I'm supporting that by working with people that book trips. That would be the Fly Shop in Redding, Yellow Dog, Flywater Travel, Frontier. So I'm a conduit to those guys, giving them information, opportunities to fish our locations. We designed a booth, a 10-foot fly fishing show trade show booth this year. Went to all the fly fishing shows, and we'll go to the IFTD dealer show in Denver in October. So getting the name out, that people know who we are, what we do. Mm-hmm. So I work also with magazine editors, videographers, photographers, so we can get publicity. And I work with the angling public, people that like to go to Chile and Iceland and Colorado and other places that we're exploring. So, I mean, who doesn't want to do a mothership trip in the Bahamas and Andros Island? I mean, I mean, these are really cool places, and they're well thought out, well managed, and it's, you know, because it's that type of a trip. You know, there's limited amount of people that can go. They're not super expensive, but they're not cheap either. So, you know, it's challenging in a very competitive market of lodges and outfitters to, you know, keep people coming and make them happy. And there's a lot of competition. So it's a never ending job. There's plenty to do. I never can get all my work done in one day. I mean, it carries over into the night, it carries over into weekends, but I work with a great crew, and it's fun. So if people want to, they can go to 11experience.com and check it out. There's some really cool
and that's
images
11
and videos.
That's the numbers 11, right?
Well, you would write it out, all the letters.
Okay.
11
Gotcha.
experience stuff. Yeah.
Yep. All right. Perfect. And so the skiing thing, I guess we may just touch on this a little bit, because there's definitely, I mean, I've done, I think 75 episodes or whatever it's been, and there's been a skiing theme. In fact, I think the last interview I did, we talked about skiing again. A lot of people are, you know, they're in the skiing industry, and then somehow they get into fly fishing. Do you have any your take on that? Why that is? Is it just outdoor sports? It's kind of all, you know, there's plenty of people that ski and do other things as well.
Yeah, I think if we can just say focus on North America and in areas that have great fishing, you also have opportunity many times to have great skiing too, from the Northeast to the upper Midwest, obviously the Rockies and the Pacific Northwest, all through California. So I think people that are kind of attracted to that lifestyle of whatever it is, whether it's retail, wholesale, manufacturing, media, etc., or you know, being a participant. Like when I was doing a lot of skiing, I worked with a photographer here in Bend, and we did the photography for ski areas that did their trail maps, some of their advertising posters and postcards, and we would go ski area to ski area. So I was just the skier guy. That's but right. I was also kind of a beginning, budding professional photographer. I'd had a couple cover shots, and so I was really learning a lot from this old pro. And then we got to go to Taos, New Mexico, and Squaw Valley, and Grand Targhee, and all these places, and we got wined and dined. And, you know, I didn't make a penny, but geez, I got to ski all day, hot tub, eat and drink for free, and meet just amazing, cool people. And then, gosh, we just look around for great opportunities to get cool pictures. And so I think there's a strata of people who just kind of like, you know, not going to work in a tall building, but maybe like being in a outfitter role or, you know, ski instructor role, ski patrolman role, and they blend together, that kind of lifestyle. You know, there's fishing bums and there's ski bums, and but there's not many golf bums.
That's true.
You know, there's not many, you know, polo bums.
Right.
You've got to have this kind of grassrootsy,
a
little bit of hardcore type person that's willing to sacrifice maybe making more money for having a great life.
That's true.
Well, it's a great life making money too. I take that back, because you can afford to send your kids to college. You can have great health insurance, but there's other people who are more risk takers.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. Okay. You know, if you look at your background and the photos you've done, do you have a photo that's kind of been maybe your most popular photo or something you're most proud of? And is there a story that goes along with it?
Well, I think the one that has probably been seen the most and people just sort of like a lot, and I do too, is an underwater permit shot from Turner Flats Lodge in Belize. And the guide's reviving the fish. He's barefoot on the sand bottom. We're fishing an ocean flat, so there's really super clear water that come in on an incoming tide, and it was just like glass. And this fish is just, perimeter cool. So he's got it by the tail, about to release it. And I had an underwater camera, not a housing, it was a dedicated dive camera, the Iconos 5 back in the film era. And I just went around and kind of took a picture from about 3 feet away of its front, and then it's kind of 45-degree angle, and then from the side. I just took 3 or 4 shots because it was film. He didn't blaze.
Yeah, he's got yellow.
Like you do now.
The guy has yellow shorts on, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
I'll
put a
that
link.
one
I'll
was
put a link.
sort of.
That's a great shot. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool. It's simple, but it just kind of has a bit of a pizzazz to it or something. And that's probably the shot that I guess is one of my best shots, I suppose. And then I can't really think of others that just completely blow my mind or anything, but I've just been super lucky to have been to so many spots and, out of the country 150 some times on fishing trips. So I've got quite a library and I just like it all. I like some very simple stuff that has mood in it, or I like a bit of humor. And some of those aren't, world-class shots technically. I mean, fine art photography is technical. I don't do it. It's for big blow-ups and expensive prints. I'm more of an editorial photography, so what you see is what you get, and I don't manipulate a lot. I just like kind of taking, shots of day-in fun experiences and everything that's wrapped around fly fishing, the travel, the food, the people you meet, wildlife, weather, everything. So I don't have a lot of super awesome, technical, perfect photos, but I've got a lot of experience of people having fun and some great catches and just interesting things that we all love on every road trip or every fishing trip. So I guess it also matters that I've done it a long time. I published my first shot when I was 16. So I've had a camera around my neck forever. And, it's so funny. More and more, I just use my phone. But, but I still have my big pro
iPhone
gear and all that. And it's fun.
Do you do the iPhone?
Oh, God, I love it. I got an iPhone 8. With, it's just a great tool, for anything. And I also use a little Olympus Tough, that little pocket camera.
Oh, yeah.
It's waterproof, and its macro setting is so good for mayflies, stoneflies, caddisflies, those macro shots that are fun to get. And, and you can drop them, you can put them underwater, and really for, $250, it's just a great tool. And that all kind of complements my big, huge case of heavy, expensive stuff. But
do you have any, when you think of, I mentioned the tips, that episode, which was great. Can you give us maybe a tip or 2 or 3 of, somebody that maybe isn't that great at taking photos, has been stuck in their point and shoot, and maybe can shed some light on how you make such great photos?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. I'd put a caveat on that with just 2 points. One is everybody should, at least once or more than once, go to keepemwet.org and read the Keep 'em Wet website. It only takes a couple minutes, and there are photo tips on it, but we really have to move in that direction as a whole. I'm sure half the people that are going to hear this go, yeah, I totally agree. We've got to keep fish wet. We can't pull them up by the gills and do all these terrible things that might have been, actually just normal style back in the earlier days. But those days are over. We put so much pressure on our fish by just having so much better technique and tippet and flies and access and information. So, we're not producing a lot more fish. We just got to take better care of them and have each experience with them be as good for the fish as possible. So one caveat. The second one, I'll just throw this out and it'll just sort of show you the movement that we're in right now. So I do a lot of presentations at fly clubs and sport shows and fly shows, and I have a list of about 20 PowerPoint shows that I send to a guy at a fly club, and he can pick what he wants me to do. Far and away the most popular subject right now is fly fishing photography. More than the Bahamas, more than Cuba, more than Alaska, more than trout insects and blah, blah, blah. Fly fishing photography, because everybody's got a phone. And so that there's a little bit of responsibility that goes along with that. So we're all interested in photography. Okay, that's cool. But that means we're going to be taking a lot more fish pictures. We used to just catch them. Wow, that's cool. Let them go out of the net, and we're good. Yeah. Catch and release. Well, now we're into catch and release 2.0. We have got to, really take care of our fish. If we're going to all be photographers, we really got to think of how we handle them, how long we handle them, and all that. So I don't want to be on the soapbox too long ago, but that is so super important. Anyway, a couple quick tips. If say I've landed a really pretty brown and I've got my iPhone in my pocket and the fish is in the net, it's unhooked, it's in the water, I'll sometimes gently just reach underneath it and bring it up to where the gills are just touching the water, and my iPhone is just down where my hand is just touching the water. So I'm shooting straight across. And if the lens of my camera or my phone is at the fish's eye level, which is usually 2 or 3 inches above the water, that low shot is really cool. Most pictures are taken at our eye level, looking down at someone with a fish or down at a fish. Generally, where someone is weighted, it's all muddy and murky and not very pretty, and it's a bad angle on the fish. You're going to get all mostly back, or, it's just not anatomically correct. So that gentle lift out of the net up at the most 2 or 3 seconds at the most, it just has to come up, be dripping, click, not even out of the water, click, done, drop. And if you're using like that Olympus Tough, you can bring it up, click, and then drop it down, and also drop your camera down and take an underwater shot and release. And it just takes a couple seconds. The fish never has to go over rocks or ground or be brought into a boat. And so, and actually that low shot of eyeball level with the camera lens the fish is always anatomically correct. You can angle the fish head to the camera a little bit to give it a little different perspective. And then non-fish shots, because I think just people casting and scenery is just really cool. So I'll always look for like a cliff or a high spot near a river or lake or flat and get up high and shoot down, kind of like a drone shot without a drone, but just getting that elevation is just a neat look because it shows the changes of depth in the water, changes in the color of the water. So it provides an interesting scenic shot, maybe with an angler or a boat in it. So we've got those super low shots of fish. We got the high shots of scenery. And then I like to look for pictures that if you're going to call yourself a photographer, also call yourself a storyteller, because if you take the same picture over and over of a person kind of squatting down with a fish, it's just not pretty, and it's just overkill, and we're done with it. I mean, Facebook and Instagram are going to kill more fish than any dam ever built. Let's move away from just fish, and get into, the other stuff, the humor, the mood, the weather, tackle, equipment, macro shots of bugs, and do 75% storytelling with our photos and maybe 25% of actually, casting, catching, releasing. And so I think if you think of yourself as a photographer, but you're actually a storyteller, you, won't bore your friends nearly as bad, and you'll just appreciate why we really love to fish, which is getting out there. And it's the travel, the preparation, tackle, organization, friends, family, dogs, boats. It's everything. It's not just grip and grin, squeezing fish.
Yeah, On that underwater photo, so when you go down with your Olympus or whatever, you go underwater, how do you get the shot, framed? Because it seems like once your camera's underwater, isn't it sometimes hard to see your viewfinder?
Yeah. If say we go back to that kind of gentle lift, click above water or right on the surface of the water, and then the drop to 3 inches below the water and release, if the camera sort of is already pre-focused for that top shot and brought down, it doesn't take but, 1/10 of a second to just sort of aim and shoot. And if you're back 10, 12 inches, you're going to have plenty of room. You'll get everything. And you can always crop in a little bit to tighten up the shot. And, but, a good point and shoot camera can shoot click, 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 click that fast. So you can do 4 shots on the release, and generally speaking, you'll see one angle that sort of you like best, and then you can start using kind of that position more often than just sort of random experimental shots. But if a fish is underwater and it's getting revived and ready to go, you can take a few shots, and I don't think that's too hard on the fish. And you'll find that you'll have a picture that you like best, and that'll be kind of your style. Everybody's got style. It's the color of our socks. It's how we comb our hair or whatever, so you'll see a shot you like best, and you can start, improving on that, and then just sort of adding more of those shots to your repertoire, and pretty soon you got a photo essay in Catch Magazine.
There you go. Yeah, no, I just think of my style of photos, and I've definitely been stuck in that old, and this is it's good to hear this because it just makes you think like, okay, next time you're out, think a little bit more just about, just think of that, before you jump into it, where you're putting your camera. I think another good tip you had just talking about is the stabilization, making sure that you're not just holding the camera, that in fact setting it on a fence post or something can help quite a bit. That's still a pretty solid tip. Yeah.
Yeah, especially with telephoto, because it's hard to handhold anything over, say, 200. But any camera, the more stable, the better. And I'm guilty of, I don't use a tripod except for occasional food shots or some time exposures at night. But because I like to fish too much. And, nothing has ever been made that catches fly line more than a tripod. So I just don't use one very often, but I will use my camera case laying it down on a gravel bar, or I'll find a rock or a fence post or a hood of my truck. And that stabilization really, if it's good scene, good composition, good light, if it's super still, it just gives it that little bit of just tack sharp essence that separates it from an amateur shot.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I have a little bit of a rapid fire round if you have a little more time to jump through a few more questions here.
Yeah, go for it.
This will be pretty quick here. I always start off the rapid fire here with just kind of your top two flies, top two tips, and top two resources for. And we were talking about Alaska fishing. You mentioned a couple of the flies like the sculpins and mouses. Do you have any specific names of patterns that you use that I could kind of share a link out to?
Yeah, well, I like two mice flies in particular, the Moorish mouse and the Mr. Henke.
Okay. Yeah, I've definitely heard of those two. Okay, and what about, do you have, and we're talking about, I guess, species-wise, we talked a little bit about char, grayling, rainbows, kings. If you were, talking, I guess just take your pick and to give it maybe a fly fishing tip or two for catching those fish if you were to get up to Alaska, anything you would throw out there?
Yeah, and I think I'd go back and mention that fry pattern again for the early season rainbows.
Oh, yeah.
You can even go on some sort of science-based websites and fisheries and see photos of baby salmon. They're just nothing but a little sliver of silver and an eye and a clear little gray tail. Mm-hmm. But if you can match that, sometimes, like, say, the Brooks River and the other rivers, they get quite a bit of guide pressure. You need to match the hatch to where we're talking millimeters and, the depth of the fish and the width of the fish, the size of the eye, because someone's catching all the fish and they have the right exact fly, because it can be seriously technical. So being familiar with the fry pattern is great. We all know the egg fishing is great and the bead fishing is great. That's pretty simple, and it doesn't need a lot of science. But the other thing in Alaska is there's a lot of hatches on rivers. There's some rivers that have fantastic caddis hatches. There's other rivers that have green drakes and beautiful mayfly hatches. There's a little lime green stone on many rivers. And so I would say always take a dry fly box and some 4X tippet, because I've been in some hatches with a seasoned veteran guide, a seasoned veteran angler, and we get there and there's literally heads coming up and sipping in mayflies. Jeez. And they look at me, they go, "Did you bring any dry flies?"
Oh, man.
Yeah. And the other guy goes, "Oh, good. Give me one." I go, well, we're talking river price here, right? River price.
That's right. What do those go for? What do those go for on the river?
Yeah, they're $20.
Jeez.
No, you never caught. But, a lot of times a guide will only have maxima down to 8 pounds or something because they generally don't need it for streamers, mice, and salmon. You have 8 to 20-pound maxima. So,
sure.
Yeah, you got a spool of 4X, and you're a hero. So remember the dry flies. Mouse is great. The tiny little fry patterns are great. And also I bring a 4-weight. And if we're in a jet boat or airplane or something, there's plenty of room for one extra little rod, because I try to either identify or talk to my guide that I maybe at lunch, could we pick a spot where there's pretty good grayling fishing. Now, I don't want to go to Alaska and only fish for grayling, but it is an iconic fish of Alaska. And after a sandwich, putting on a dry fly, fishing for rising grayling, getting some 16 or 17-inch grayling, it's really fun. And so I always try to throw that in. And the last part would be, don't forget pike. A lot of the lower parts of the river, not in the high headwater areas, but lower parts where they're meeting the bay or meeting another big tributary, there's sloughs, and they're weed-covered sloughs that you'd find in the Midwest or anywhere, and they're loaded with pike, many of them. So wire leader, some pike flies, on a 7 or an 8-weight. It's really fun.
Perfect. And what about a couple of resources? If somebody was putting together a trip up to Alaska, anything you would recommend to get some information on either, I don't know, lodges, fishing, anything that, it could be online or otherwise? Anything come to mind?
Well, yeah, I think basically if a person has the idea first of maybe doing a trip to Alaska, and it just takes seconds online to do a search, and you'll find that there's publications that have had articles. There's local fly shops that will give advice. There's the charter companies that organize the raft and the cook stove and all that. So there's a massive amount of information available, and it'll just literally take seconds to start seeing all that. It's not that hard to do. And then it's just a matter of getting the right people together. Probably start with a group of about 4. You never want to take one raft, because what if that one pops? And so that we could talk another hour on that, because when you catch even a trout or especially a salmon and you let it go, you don't want to just jump in the boat and start rowing, because you've got salmon slime and smell on now the oars, the side of the raft, your vest, your dry bag. So common sense is by far the most important thing on a float trip in Alaska. So you wash your hands really well. You wash the boat down really well. At night, you don't want a bear walking into camp and taking a bite out of your raft. So you always go in 2s or 3s, and you always have a backup. And, actually, I forgot where I was going with all that, but it's just common sense. Go with a small group, and at least enough to fill 2 rafts, so probably 4.
That's a great tip on the boats. I've done some some trips up there as well, but actually it's funny because on the Rogue River has been probably the one place where we've had bears actually come into the boats. Oh, and
they're super smart. The black bears on the Rogue know how to open coolers by the latches. They're unbelievable.
God, I know, it's pretty crazy. Okay, well let's keep it. We got a few more. So, what's your favorite beverage when you get off the river?
Okay. Non-alcoholic would be a Arnold Palmer.
Okay.
If I was going to have a beer, it would be a Shiner.
Oh yeah.
In Texas.
Yep.
I'm on a Texas roll. That's right
awesome.
Now. So I like them all.
River Horse is gonna love you for that one, for that reply.
Oh God, yeah! Shout out. Assist River Horse.
Yeah. So the Arnold Palmer, I think of alcohol when you hear that name, but that's not an alcoholic drink, huh?
No, it's half iced tea, half lemonade. Very refreshing.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah, if you got to do a big drive or something like that. Yeah, it gives you a little kick, and
perfect.
It just tastes good.
I'll try that out.
And then I like the lawnmower beers too. NASCAR beers. I like them. I like the light. Non-beer beers, but I live in like Busch and PBRs.
PBR, that's right.
Coors Light. After you mow your lawn, is there anything better?
Yeah, you gotta. You can't. The IPAs are great, but you can't drink a bunch of those, otherwise you feel like crap. So if you wanna.
And then if I'm in Livingston, Montana, or somewhere in Wyoming, or I like Manhattan, with my dinner. So I'll go classic on that, and then kind of cheap on the beer, and then I try not to do the traditional 7-Eleven soda pop stuff.
Sure.
But
yep.
You have to sometimes.
Okay, and what about if you do you have a favorite either band or type of music you like to listen to?
I'm all over the board. I just went and looked at my Pandora playlist, my stations, and I've got everything from, well, I don't know if they're obscure, but say the Bodines and classic American rock. I've got some interesting, eclectic cultural music from the Caribbean.
Oh, cool.
I'm not a big jazz guy. I'm not a big rap guy.
Yeah.
But I think when you cross Idaho into Montana, you better be listening to some Johnny Cash,
That's right,
some Merle, or some Hank.
Oh, yeah.
And just crank it up and sing along.
Yeah.
I go from ZZ Top to Nora Jones, everything in between.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, and what about, so you talked about skiing. Were there any other sports that you played or were into during your life other than skiing? Yeah,
I was actually a very good gymnast, and I started early at 4 years old. My mother was kind of acrobatic. We were always doing weird flips and games and stuff as little kids, and then I just sort of got into it. I really liked it, and so that sort of segued into springboard diving, and I had a good run, and then I coached both, and then I was a judge of both gymnastics and diving.
Oh, wow.
And I really enjoyed playing soccer, like every kid. I loved baseball. I never got into football as a player.
Yeah.
It overlapped different things that I was better at.
What were you best
at?
What was the one sport that you maybe would have gone pro in, or you had the best chance?
I would say in this order: ski racing. Then, even though there wasn't any professional diving or gymnastics, I was good. I was a scholarship type diver and gymnast, and then I enjoyed soccer a lot. I was on an adult league in Bend, Oregon, and we traveled and played some Hispanic teams that were great, some Russian teams that were really good, and then just other club teams. And it was just a good way to stay in shape. And we practiced at 4,000 feet, and we could go down to sea level and just run run like crazy. So
that's cool.
That was always fun. And,
okay. What about your? Do you have a piece of like non-fishing gear, something that maybe you don't leave home without, maybe in your travels or something like that? Anything come to mind other than a waterproof bag? It seems like I've got the that's come up a few times. Anything else that comes to mind?
Gosh, there's probably a ton, but I've got writer's block.
Yeah. No, think about it. If something comes to mind, you can let me know. What about your rod reel line? If you're going for, let's just stick with, we were kind of on the Chinook, I guess, thinking. What do you have, like a couple weights and brands and stuff you like to use?
Well, I am brand neutral, mainly because there's so much good stuff out there, and having been in the manufacturing and distribution side and retail side and the media side, and basically every aspect of our sport. I just have so many friends.
Yeah. Have you done it all?
I mean, I've got.
Have you repped like almost everybody, or is it one of those things where you've just had a few main companies? Nobody could rep everybody, but I never did work with Farbank, which is Sage, Reddington, and Rio, even though I know a lot of the guys up there. They're world-class people, world-class products. Yep.
And, but, if I go to a sports show, I'm hanging out with the guys at Thomas & Thomas. I'm having a blast with Tom and all his crew from Orvis. I'm seeing the guys at SA. And a lot of the new companies that have come up, Howler Brothers.
Oh, yeah.
So it's all a big, huge family, and so that's why I say I'm sort of brand neutral.
Cool. That's cool. What is
my rod quiver is everything, and all price points too. I love the cheap rods too.
Exactly. No, I know they're pretty much, most of them are good. So as far as Chinook, so you got a what weight are you and what line are you using? Like just the type of line are you using for Chinook there?
Okay, I fish mainly one line because I don't try to target really, really big water. I like smaller to medium-sized water, and you can use not the fastest sinking wet tip that you own, but kind of a medium fast sinking wet tip. Because a lot of times Chinooks suspend up just a little bit. You don't need to dredge the bottom, and you don't want to dredge and snag fish. So,
and you're not spade, you're not using spade rods or any of that stuff. This is all single hand.
I'm more of a single hand guy, so I like a 9-foot, 9 weight is generally fine if it's the potential of some really big fish, and or there's log jams and things like that where you really got to put pressure on fish. I'll use a 10.
Are guys using the spade rods up there now?
Oh yeah,
for
many people.
Yeah,
I'm in the minority now.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's right. It's been a while since I've been up there, and I was definitely a single hand person forever as well, and slowly made the change like some of us do.
Oh yeah.
Cool. Okay, well that is about it. I guess before I let you get out of here, just want to check with you maybe in the next 6 to 12 months. Do you have anything going on, anything new we can expect from you? It sounds like this 11 experience is pretty good. Anything else going on?
Yeah, that's got my full attention right now. And, as I've got a lot of opportunities, as in my earlier conversations with you, of being a rep and then traveling for magazines and doing photo assignments and catch magazines. I've got to see an awful lot, but I still like local fishing. I like my home waters because you get intimate with pools and how they change through the depth of the water, temperature of the water, the seasons. I just love that intimacy of kind of rigging up at home, knowing that this PMD or this little scud or something's going to be the right fly when I get there. So I like that local home waters fishing, and I'm lucky because I've got the Crooked River just over the hill. I've got the Deschutes, the Metoyas, great high lakes around here in Central Oregon. And
you've already...
So I get a little grumpy.
Yeah.
I get a little grumpy if I'm not getting my local fix, so I can wait and get my Belize and get my Kamchatka and all that stuff that's work related. I could never afford to do all that if it wasn't a job.
Yeah.
But I do get a little weird if I'm not, I love some pre-salmon fly hatch time. I love blue wing olives. I love PMDs. I love squalls, so if that's happening and I'm not getting a little of it, I'm not the nicest guy in the world.
There you go.
I got to get out of town.
That's pretty cool to hear. Yeah, after traveling in all these places, and you still, do some traveling. It's that home stuff. It sounds a lot like, a little bit like Jeff Courier, who I had on, and he talked about the same thing, how he's got, he traveled, whatever. I can't remember the question I asked him, but he basically said, he loves the smallmouth bass fishing. He's got these little spots local that he just, if he had to pick one, that's always kind of a rough question to ask, but, he loves keeping it at home. So good, Brian. Well, I appreciate you coming on and sharing, all your stories here. Definitely, if people want to find you, I guess Brian Okeefe.photography.com is the best place.
Yeah, there's contact information there, and it's just a very basic little website that just says basically, hey, I've got a few pictures. If you need them, give me a call. But people can track me down if they want any more information or anything we've talked about. I'd be glad to be of assistance.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for coming on and sharing the stories, and we'll keep in touch with you.
Thanks, Dave. It's been a pleasure.
Okay. See ya.
Yep. Bye.
So there you go. If you want to find all the show notes with all the links we covered, just go to wetflyswing.com/Okeefe. Interested in getting your spade casting critiqued? You can go to the members group, and this is one of the big bonuses. You get just one of them if you join the group. And memberships start at $5 per month. You get this and access to all of our partner companies and a bunch of great resources. So you can go to wetflyswing.com/members to find out how to support local companies, the podcast, and get a bunch of cool bonuses. Thanks again for stopping by to check out the show today. I'm looking forward to catching up with you soon and hope to maybe see you on the river or online.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com. And if you found this episode helpful, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes.
All right, this is a special bonus. We've got Juna Muna Stewart on board, and she's going to talk a little bit about how we're going to catch some fish this summer, which is coming up, and maybe we'll start off with some cutthroat fishing, but then we're going to do some stuff. All right, Juna, so what do you think? Where do you want to go fishing? What are you excited to do this summer?
Deschutes.
Yep, the Deschutes. And what's your favorite thing about the Deschutes? What are you excited to do? Catch fish? Do you like fishing or do you like camping more?
I can't wait to go on my backpacking trip with Mama and me.
Oh, that's right. That's right. We got the backpacking trip. That's what we should tell Mom.
And we're going to do it at the Deschutes.
Oh, really? Okay. All right, we're going to do it at the Deschutes.
That's me.
Yeah, that's you. Exactly. The louder you talk, and when you bump it, that also bumps it, so you don't want to bump the mic. And all this ruffling, that also picks up, so you got to be quiet. Usually just talk. But you can talk loud if you want. Okay, we'll sign off. We got to let them go. Give them a big sign off.
No.
Give them something happy for them to leave. The last thing they're going to hear is your voice. So say something happy for them. Anything.
Have a good day.
Oh, yeah. Say have a good day. Say it loud.
Have a good day.
All right. All right. Perfect.